Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Viswaprajna channel. Today, we are going to again start have the reading of Sophie's World by Jostein Gardner. Jostein Gaarder. Right? To get used to pronouncing the Norwegian names. So, we had a break for the last couple of weeks because of on the Women's World Cup, which I'm happy to report that Women's Cricket World Cup, which I'm happy to report that the Indian team has won. And at the same time, we had another conflict with something else, so I had to postpone this session. But we are again back, and we are back to hopefully accelerate fast enough so that we can finish the book. Because later on, there are some philosophies that we are all very familiar with, like Darwin, Marx, um, the so-called freedom movement and things like that. So hopefully, we'll be able to quickly go through it. But nevertheless, today we are going to focus on the post-romanticism era. And we are joined in the panel by Skara. Skara, good morning.
Good morning, Andy.
Yeah. So once again, a quick reminder: this is an English reading session. So we also have some participants potentially that cannot speak local languages, local Indian languages. So if you want to join the panel, you're more than welcome. But the request is to keep the conversation to English as much as possible. So with that, Skeharu, we finished. First of all, thanks for joining the panel. Last week or the few weeks, 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before, we completed the romanticism or the romantics, their philosophies, and how everything is spirit and everything is not material, etc., etc. Right? So today we are going to move on from that. Then we are going to go to this, from romanticism we are going to take a turn, and we are going to go to the proposals or the hypotheses of Hegel, right? And page number 208 in the book that we have been.
Hegel. Okay.
Yeah. And the headline for the subchapter is "The reasonable is that which is viable." Very fascinating.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, shall I start?
Yeah, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. Hegel. The reasonable is that which is viable. Hilda let the big ring binder fall to the floor with a heavy thud. She lay on her bed, staring up at the ceiling. Her thoughts were in a turmoil. Now, her father really had made her head swim, the rascal. How could he? Sophie had tried to talk directly to her. She had asked her to rebel against her father, and she had really managed to plant an idea in Hilda's mind. A plan. Sophie and Alberto could not so much as harm a hair on his head, but Hilda could. And through Hilda, Sophie could reach her father. She agreed with Sophie and Alberto that he was going too far in his game of shadows. Even if he had only made Alberto and Sophie up, there were limits to the show of power he ought to permit himself. Poor Sophie and Alberto. They were just as defenseless against the Major's imagination as a movie screen is against the film projector. Hilda would certainly teach him a lesson when he got home. She could already see the outline of a really good plan. She got up and went to look out over the bay. It was almost 2 o'clock. She opened the window and called over toward the boathouse. Mom, her mother came out. I'll be down with some sandwiches in about an hour, okay? I just have to read a chapter on Hegel. And
Right.
now the chapter starts. Alberto and Sophie had seated themselves in the two chairs by window facing the lake.
George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel was a legitimate child of romanticism, began Alberto. One could almost say, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, perfect. One could almost say he developed with the German spirit as it gradually evolved in Germany. He was born in Stuttgart in 1770 and began to study theology in Tübingen at the age of Tübingen, or whatever, however they pronounce it, at the age of 18. Beginning in 1799, he worked with Schelling in Jena during the time when the Romantic movement was experiencing its most explosive growth. After a period as assistant professor in Jena or Jena, he became a professor in Heidelberg, the center of German national romanticism. In 1818, he was appointed professor in Berlin, just as just at the time when the city was becoming the spiritual center of Europe. He died of cholera in 1831, but not before Hegelianism had gained an enormous following at nearly all universities in Germany. So you start seeing that the idea started incubating not just among people, but in places like universities and things like that.
Mm.
That's the shift. So he covered a lot of ground. Yes. So sorry, that is yours.
Yeah, okay. So he covered a lot of ground.
Yes, and so did his philosophy. Hegel united and developed almost all the ideas that have surfaced in the Romantic period, but he was sharply critical of many of the Romantics, including Schelling.
What was it he criticized?
Schelling, as well as other Romantics, had said that the deepest meaning of life lay in what they called the world spirit. Hegel also uses the term world spirit, but in a new sense. When Hegel talks of world spirit or world reason, he means the sum of human utterances, because only man has a spirit.
In this sense, he can speak of. Is it mine?
In this,
Okay.
yeah, in this sense, he can speak of the progress of the world spirit throughout history. However, he must never forget that he is referring to human life, human thought, and human culture.
That makes his spirit much less spooky. It is not lying in wait anymore, like a slumbering intelligence in rocks and trees.
Now, you remember that Kant had talked about something he called das Ding and sich, although he denied that man could have any clear cognition of the innermost secrets of nature. He admitted that there exists a kind of unattainable truth. Hegel said that truth is subjective, thus rejecting the existence of any truth above or beyond human reason. All knowledge is human knowledge, he said.
He had to get the philosophers down to earth again, right?
Yes, perhaps you could say that. However, Hegel's philosophy was so all embracing and diversified that for present purposes, we shall content ourselves with highlighting some of the main aspects of his philosophy. It is actually doubtful whether one can say that Hegel had his own philosophy at all. So he combined everything. It's almost like pulling everything together and trying to make sense of it. What is usually known as Hegel's philosophy is mainly a method for understanding the progress of history. Hegel's philosophy teaches us nothing about the inner nature of life, but it can teach us to think productively.
Hmm. That's not unimportant.
Yeah, what that means is it's important.
Mm.
So you can say it's important or it's not unimportant. It's the same thing. All the philosophical, the double negatives are now we are truly in a philosophy class. All the philosophical systems before Hegel had one thing in common, namely the attempt to set up eternal criteria for what man can know about the world. Eternal means something that doesn't change with time, basically, right? So, what are those ideas or principles that are not affected by time, right? That's what most of the philosophical systems were attempting to do before Hegel, basically. This was true of Democritus, Spinoza, Hume, and Kant. Each and everyone had tried to investigate the basis of human cognition, but they had all made pronouncements on the timeless factor of human knowledge of the world.
Isn't that a philosopher's job?
Hegel did not believe it was possible. He believed that the basis of human cognition changed from one generation to the next. There were therefore no eternal truths, no timeless reason. The only fixed point philosophy can hold on to is history itself.
Mm. I'm afraid you'll have to explain that. History is in a constant state of change. So, how can it be a fixed point?
A river, now this is very Buddhist by the way, just FYI. A
Oh.
river is also in a constant state of change. That does not mean you can't talk about it, but you cannot say at which place in the valley the river is the truest river. So the
No,
Buddhists say,
because
just FYI, the
mm,
Buddhists say that you can never step into a river more than once.
because it's flowing, na?
The definition of river for them is it includes the flow, basically,
Oh.
right? So the river is always changing because it's always flowing. Because of
Mm,
that, there's no such thing as the river. You only have the river at that moment, basically.
correct.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead, please. Please.
No, because it's just as much river all the way through.
Yeah. So to Hegel, history was like a running river. Every tiny movement in the water at a given spot in the river is determined by the falls and eddies in the river, in the water higher upstream. But these movements are determined too by the rocks and bends in the river at the point where you are observing.
I get it, I think.
And the history of thought or of reason is like this river. The thoughts that are washed along with the current of past tradition, as well as the material conditions prevailing at the time, help to determine how you think. You can therefore never claim that a particular thought is correct forever and ever, but the thought can be correct from where you stand. So slowly it is turning towards the subject, but not quite. You know, you are
Mm,
still looking at it from the object, right? You are trying to describe the object, but you are slowly starting to make it a little bit relative because you keep changing, because the time keeps changing, time in which you are observing that history, right? So there's
mm,
no such thing as eternal. It's all relative depending on where you are in the history, basically.
mm. That's not the same as saying that everything is equally right or equally wrong, is it?
Certainly not. But some things can be right or wrong in relation to a certain historical context. If you advocated slavery today, you would be at least, you would at best be thought foolish. But you wouldn't have been considered foolish 2,500 years ago, even though there were already progressive voices in favor of slavery's abolition. But we can take a more local example. Not more than 100 years ago, it was not considered unreasonable to burn off large areas of forest in order to cultivate the land. Deforestation, basically. But it is extremely unreasonable today. We have a completely different and better, potentially, basis for such judgments.
Now I see.
So now what he is saying is you cannot judge the actions, what are considered to be in quotes moral actions a few hundred or even thousand years ago based on a framework that you have developed today, basically, right?
Hmm.
Which brings into question, even in those days, certain acts were considered to be immoral and we consider them immoral today also, right? So is it relevant only in that time frame? As in like you can extend the horizon to thousands of years, or is it truly eternal, right? That is the question. Hegel pointed out that, as regards to philosophical reflection, also, reason is dynamic. It's a process, in fact. And the truth is this same process, since there are no criteria beyond the historical process itself that can determine what is the most true or the most reasonable.
Examples, please.
Yes, you cannot single out particular.
That's my
you,
standard
yeah,
dialogue
yeah,
always.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You cannot single out particular thoughts from antiquity, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, or the Enlightenment and say they were right or wrong. Thank you very much. Right? Skagaru, just to put it in context, we are seeing a lot of such extreme, I would say, uh, people doing this again and again in order to potentially, uh, I don't know how to put it, is the objective to inflict pain or to raise conversation? I do not know, but we are seeing a lot of this happening basically, right?
Questioning. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, questioning from a, how do I put it? You are removing the
Questioning
frame of
not.
reference. Yeah, you are removing the frame of reference and applying today's frame
Mm.
in order to critique uh, things that were of antiquity. And that's what, what's his name, Knox is saying is not the right way to, it's the wrong process of analysis, basically. Right?
Mm.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. You had a question.
Yeah, questioning not to get an answer. but questioning to kind of uh, humiliate you for doing whatever you're doing, whatever you're
Right. So
comfortable with.
that's an
Yeah.
assumption, right?
Mm.
That's why I was like, I don't know what their frame is in order to inflict pain or in order to spur
Mm.
discussion. I do not know what it is. But fundamentally, it's the wrong philosophical process even. That's what
Correct.
Hegel would argue, basically.
Mm.
Right? That's what Knox is saying. You cannot single out particular thoughts from antiquity. Antiquity is posterity, like the previous many, many generations ago, right? The Middle Ages, the Renaissance, or the Enlightenment, and say they were right or wrong. By the same token, you cannot say that Plato was wrong and that Aristotle was right. Neither can you say that Hume was wrong, but Kant and Schilling were right, right? Schelling. That would be an anti-historical way of thinking. You see that?
Mm. Anti historical way of thinking. No, it doesn't sound right.
In fact, you cannot detach any philosopher or any thought at all from that philosopher's or that thought's historical context. But here I come to another point. Because something new is always being added, reason is progressive. In other words, human knowledge is constantly expanding and progressing. This is where I disagree with Knox also. Because sometimes there is regression, basically.
Mm.
Regression means going back. There is regression that happens, that human thought is always not progressing linearly forward. Point number one, right? Point number two, if a thought is proposed as eternal, for example, then to say that that thought's historicity needs to be questioned, I think is a redundancy or a waste of time, basically. Because at that point, you remove the historical context, and if somebody claims it is eternal, that is timeless, you just have to look at it from where you are standing, because the assumption fundamentally is that it is timeless.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Correct.
So, for example, a very simple point, and then we'll move on. We are discussing Western philosophy.
Mm.
I can sit where I am in time and then examine Advaita. I do not have to go searching for the historicity of it
Mm.
because it is proposed. The proposal itself says it is eternal, right?
Correct.
Timeless. Yeah. Akshara, right? It doesn't, what do you call? So we have in Bhagavad Gita, we have
Ksharavavanti.
this Akshara Parabrahma Yoga, basically, right? Something
Mm.
that doesn't decay with time, basically, right? So I can sit here and examine it because that's how it has been proposed. So anyway, please go ahead.
Mm. Okay, does that mean that Kant's philosophy is nevertheless more right than Plato's?
Yes, this is where that river principle, right? You
Mm.
can argue relatively that this seems better than that, but you cannot say this is the truest place of the river, basically, right? Yes, the world's spirit has developed and progressed from Plato to Kant, and it's a good thing. If we return to the example of the river, we could say that there is now more water in it. It has been running for over 1,000 years. Only Kant should think that his truths will remain on the banks of the river like immovable rocks. Kant's ideas get processed too, and his reason becomes the subject of future generations' criticism, which is exactly what has happened.
Mm. But the river you talked about,
Yes,
where does it go?
good question. Hegel claimed that the world spirit is developing towards an ever expanding knowledge of itself, basically, right? It is the same with rivers. They become broader and broader as they get nearer to the sea. According to Hegel, history is the story of the world spirit, gradually coming to consciousness of itself. Although the world has always existed, human culture and human development have made the world spirit increasingly conscious of its intrinsic value.
How could he be so sure of that?
He claimed it as a historical reality. It was not a prediction. Anybody who studies history will see that humanity has also advanced towards ever increasing self knowledge and self development. I disagree with this, but that is the proposal of Hegel, right? I think we are actually in a regressive cycle right now because there's too much focus on the material and not on the self.
Mm.
Okay, that is one man's opinion. But nevertheless, Hegel is saying, if you look at it, of course, the time horizon has to be expanded quite a bit, right? So in the last 100, 150 years, it has been very focused on the physical development. Who knows, there might be a shift towards the self, basically, right? Let's see. According to Hegel, the study of history shows that humanity is moving towards greater rationality and freedom. you know, In spite of all its capers, historical development is progressive. We say that history is purposeful.
So it develops. That's clear enough.
Yes, history is one long chain of reflections. Hegel also indicated certain rules that apply for its chain of reflections. Anyone studying history in depth will observe that a thought is usually proposed on the basis of another of basis of other previously proposed thoughts. But as soon as one thought is proposed, it will be contradicted by another. A tension arises between these two opposite ways of thinking. But this tension is resolved by the proposal of a third thought which accommodates the best of both points of view. Hegel calls this a dialectic process.
Could you give an example?
You remember that the pre-Socratics discussed the question of primeval substance and change.
More or less.
Then the Eleatics claimed that change was in fact impossible. They were therefore forced to deny any change, even though they could register the changes through their senses. The Eleatics had put forward a claim, and Hegel called a standpoint like that a thesis. So thesis or hypothesis basically, right? So they
Mm.
propose something, pratipadana, proposal basically.
Mm. Yes?
But whatever such an extreme claim, whenever such an extreme claim is proposed, a contradictory claim will arise. Hegel called this a negation or a refutation. We can think of it like that. The negation of an Eleatic philosophy was Heraclitus, who said that everything flows. There is now a tension between two diametrically opposed schools of thought. But this tension was resolved when Empedocles pointed out that both claims were partially right and partially wrong.
Mm. Yes, it all comes back to me now.
The Eleatics were right in that nothing actually changes, but they were not right in holding that we cannot rely on our senses. Heraclitus had been right in that we can rely on our senses, but not right in holding that everything flows.
Mm. Because there was more than one substance, it was the combination that flowed, not the substance itself.
Right. Empedocles' standpoint, which provided the compromise between the two schools of thought, was what Hegel called the negation of the negation.
What a terrible term.
Yes, thank you. We are in a philosophy class. There's no such
Double negatives, negation of negation.
So you make a proposal, somebody negates it. Now you negate the negation because you are trying to find a common ground between the two. He also called these three stages of knowledge: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. How beautiful. You could, for example, say that Descartes' rationalism was a thesis, which was contradicted by Hume's empirical antithesis. But the contradiction or the tension between the two modes of thought was resolved in Kant's synthesis. Kant agreed with the rationalists in some things and with the empiricists in others. But the story doesn't end with Kant. Kant's synthesis now becomes the point of departure for another chain of reflections or triad, because the synthesis will also be contradicted by a new antithesis. So you're getting the hang
Mm.
of it, right? Because the synthesis is also a thesis.
Ah, correct, correct.
So that will now be negated and another synthesis will happen, which is
Mm.
also a thesis. Because of that, again, the cycle continues.
It's all very theoretical.
Yes, it certainly is theoretical, but Hegel didn't see it as a pressing history into any kind of framework. He believed that history itself revealed this dialectical pattern. He thus claimed he had uncovered certain laws for the development of reason or for the progress of the world spirit through history.
There it is again.
But Hegel's dialectic is not only applicable to history. When we discuss something, we think dialectically, right? So let me make sure I put the dialectic meaning because it's coming up again and again, right?
Mm.
Dialectic is a method of reasoning that involves the reconciliation or to find a higher truth originating from the so-called defined. Yeah. So I'll just put it like this. You can just go to Google and they have a nice picture also. The thesis, antithesis, and then the synthesis. Right? Okay. Dialectic is a method of reasoning that involves the reconciliation of opposing ideas to find a higher truth. So there it is. Good. Okay. But Hegel's dialectic is not only applicable to history. When we discuss something, we think dialectically. We try to find flaws in the argument. Hegel called that the negative thinking. But when we find flaws in an argument, we preserve the best of it.
Give me an example.
Well, when a socialist and a conservative sit down together to resolve a social problem, a tension will quickly be revealed between their conflicting modes of thought. But this does not mean that one is absolutely right and the other totally wrong. It is possible that they are both partially right and partially wrong. And as the argument evolves, the best of both arguments will often crystallize.
I hope.
But while we are in the throes of a discussion like that, it's not easy to decide which position is more rational. In a way, it's up to history to decide what's right and what's wrong. The reasonable is that which is viable.
Hmm.
We've
Hmm.
come to the punchline.
Whatever survives is right.
Or vice versa. That which is right survives. It's the exact opposite of it, actually.
Ah.
Although there are some schools of thought, right, which all these colored books, right, they try to eliminate the other school of thought through violence, basically, right? So
Mm.
they don't think dialectically; they think oppressively, or they think I don't know what is the right term, right? They think through violence, actually, right? And
Mm.
that doesn't that freezes, according to Hegel, that freezes the human spirit, the development of the human spirit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Don't you
So
have a
it's not
tiny
whatever
example for
survives
me?
is right; it is the right is what survives.
Mm.
Yeah.
Correct. Even for us to know whatever survived or whichever is right, it should become history first. అంతే కదా?
Yeah, it should be included as a part of legitimate history, not the jaundiced
Mm.
history that we are taught in India, basically.
Correct.
Yeah,
Okay. Don't you
because
have a
then
tiny example for me?
absolutely. So we'll come to the example. The thing is, if the history is jaundiced or if it is biased, then you will see that the history and your reality have a departure point, as in like they don't agree with each other, right?
Mm.
Because if X, Y, Z, whatever it is so great, then historically only that should have survived. But something else is surviving, right? You see that contradiction, especially in Indian history. And then you realize that, look, the population does not, where the population is or where the nation is not agreeing with what the national history is that is accepted. Then you start realizing that people manipulate it. It's true even for the neighboring country, Pakistan. The history that
Mm.
is taught does not correspond with their reality, basically. And then you
Correct.
start realizing that it has been manipulated. Okay. Let's go to the example. 150 years ago, there were a lot of people fighting for women's rights. Many people also bitterly opposed giving women equal rights. When we read the arguments of both sides today, it is not difficult to see which side had the more reasonable opinions. But we must not forget that we have the knowledge of hindsight. When the knowledge of hindsight is erased, is when you see contradictions. Yeah. If proved to be the case that those who it proved to be the case that those who fought for equality were right, a lot of people would no doubt cringe if they saw in print what their grandfathers had said in the matter.
Correct. I'm sure
Rabbinical
they would.
patriarchy.
Mm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sure they would. What was Hegel's view?
About the equality of sexes,
Isn't that what we are talking about?
would you like to hear a quote?
Oh, very much.
Okay, so here is what Hegel said. The difference between man and woman is like that between animals and plants, he said. Men correspond to animals, while women correspond to plants because their development is more placid and the principle that underlies it is rather vague unity of feeling. When women hold the helm of government, the state is at once in jeopardy because women regulate their actions not by the demands of universality, but by arbitrary inclinations and opinions. Women are educated, who knows how, as it were, by breathing in ideas, by living rather than by acquiring knowledge. The status of manhood, on the other hand, is attained only by the stress of thought and much technical exertion. I want to actually write this paragraph in like engrave it somewhere, basically, right? because my opinions are not this radical, but it would be good to quote Hegel, right, in order to make a
Mm,
point. Go ahead, please, please.
Bon, look at this. Women regulate their actions not by the demands of universality, but by arbitrary inclinations and opinions.
Your feminism.
Okay, thank you for entering the panel, sir. I
This
thought
is
you
Hegel
will enter at
saying.
a very crucial point and then you did.
See, I'm always at the right time and the right moment.
Timing is everything. When it comes to the stock market or when it comes to a session.
I know.
All right, sir.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you. That will be quite enough. I would rather not hear any more statements like that.
But it is a striking example of how people's views of what is rational change all the time. It shows that Hegel was also a child of his time, as in, like, he was a product of his surroundings, basically. And so are we. Our obvious views will not stand the test of time either.
What views, for example?
I have no such examples. He doesn't want
Why
to
not?
state that he's not going to be,
Why not?
because I would be exemplifying things that are already undergoing a change. For instance, I could say it's stupid to drive a car because cars pollute the environment. Lots of people think this already, but history will prove that much of what we think is obvious will not hold up in the light of history.
I see.
We can also observe something else. The many men in Hegel's time could who could reel off gross broadsides like the one on the inferiority of women hastened the development of feminism.
How so?
They proposed a thesis. Why? Because women had already begun to rebel. There's no need to have an opinion on something everyone agrees on. And the more grossly they express themselves about women's inferiority, the stronger became the negation.
Yes, of course.
You may say that the very best that can happen is to have energetic opponents. The more extreme they become, the more powerful the reaction they'll have to face. That there's a saying about more grist to the mill.
My mill began to grind more energetically a minute ago.
Of course, from the point of view of pure logic or philosophy, there will often be a dialectical tension between two concepts.
For example,
If I reflect on the concept of being, as in, like, I am being, right? I will be obliged to introduce the opposite concept, that of nothing. You can't reflect on your existence without immediately realizing that you won't always exist. The tension between being and nothing becomes resolved in the concept of becoming. Because if something is in the process of becoming, it both is and is not.
idi. Wah wah, wah wah. I see that.
Super.
Oh, Shravan you missed one. The thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
No. Do
Yeah,
you have an exam for that? Let us see.
now it is being, nothing, becoming.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting, huh? Hegel
Yeah,
chapter. Yeah.
I know. Hegel's reason is thus dynamic logic. Since reality is characterized by opposites, a description of the reality must therefore also be full of opposites. Here is an example for you. This comes back. Now it is coming back. The opposites, right? Right? The dvandvas that we talk about in Indian
Hmm.
philosophy. Here is another example for you. The Danish nuclear physicist Niels Bohr is said to have told a story about Newton's having a horseshoe over his front door,
That's for luck.
but it is only a superstition, and Newton was anything but superstitious. When someone asked him if he really believed in that kind of thing, he said, "No, I don't, but I am told it works anyway."
Doesn't that mean he's believing in it?
No, he doesn't believe in it, but some people say it works, so hey, whatever.
Trying it.
That the
Oh.
opposite, the contradiction. You see that?
Kada. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird. Amazing.
Yes, it is. But his answer was quite dialectical, a contradiction in terms almost. Niels Bohr, who, like our own Norwegian poet Vinje, was also known for his ambivalence, once said, there are two kinds of truths. There are the superficial truths, the opposite of which are obviously wrong, but there are also the profound truths whose opposites are equally right.
Adi. Bah.
So no, it's like this. You go to the temple, you believe that it works. I don't, but people say it works anyway. So you might ask,
Mm. What kind of truths can they be?
if I say life is short, for example,
I would agree.
but on another occasion, I could throw open my arms and say life is long.
You're right. That's also true, in a sense.
Exactly. Finally, I'll give you an example of how a dialectic tension can result in a spontaneous act which leads to a sudden change.
Yes, please do.
Imagine a young girl who always answers her mother with a yes. Yes, mom. Okay, mom. As you wish, mom. At once, mom.
Gives me the shudders.
Finally, the girl's mother gets absolutely maddened by her daughter's over obedience and shouts, "Stop being such a goody goody." And the girl says, "Okay, mom."
I would have slapped her.
No violence, please. Perhaps, what would you have done if the girl had answered instead? But I won't. But I want to be a goody goody.
That would have been an odd answer. Maybe I would have slapped her anyway.
In other words, the situation was deadlocked. The dialectic tension had come to a point where something had to happen.
Like a slap in the face?
A final aspects of it, I don't think so, but anyway, a final aspect of Hegel's philosophy needs to be mentioned here.
I'm listening.
Do you remember how we said that the Romantics were individualists?
The path of mystery leads inward?
Yeah, this individualism, it does, right? And that's why I find it quite irritating when people attribute collectiveness to some of these darshanas, basically.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not. The theory is common, but the journey is individual. This individualism also met its negation or opposite in Hegel's philosophy. Hegel emphasized what he called the objective powers. Objective means it's same for everybody. Among such powers, Hegel emphasized the importance of the family, civil society, and the state. He might say that Hegel was somewhat skeptical of the individual. He believed that the individual was an organic part of the community. Reason or world spirit came to light first and foremost in the interplay of people.
Explain that more clearly, please.
Reason manifests itself above all in language, and a language is something we are born into. The Norwegian language manages quite well without Mr. Hansen, but Mr. Hansen cannot manage without Norwegian. It is thus not the individual who forms the language, it is the language which forms the individual.
I guess you could say so.
In the same way that a baby is born into a language, it is also born into its historical background, the cultural background, right? And nobody has a free relationship to that kind of background. He who does not find his place within the state is therefore an unhistorical person. This idea, you may recall, was also central for the great Athenian philosophers. Just as the state is unthinkable without citizens, citizens are unthinkable without the state.
Obviously.
According to Hegel, the state is more than the individual citizen. It is moreover more than the sum of its citizens. So Hegel says one cannot resign from society. Anyone who simply shrugs their shoulders at the society they live in and wants to find their soul will therefore be ridiculed.
I don't know whether I wholly agree, but okay.
According to Hegel, it is not the individual that finds itself, it is the world spirit.
The world spirit finds itself?
Hegel said that the world spirit returns to itself in three stages. By that, he means that it becomes conscious of itself in three stages.
Which are?
The world spirit first becomes conscious of itself in the individual. Hegel calls this subjective spirit. It reaches a higher consciousness in the family, civil society, and the state. Hegel calls this objective spirit because it appears in the interaction between people. But there is a third stage.
And that is?
The world spirit reaches the highest form of self realization in absolute spirit. And this absolute spirit is art, religion, and philosophy. And these kinds of, and of these, philosophy is the highest form of knowledge because in philosophy, the world spirit reflects on its own impact on history. So the world spirit first meets itself in philosophy. You could say perhaps that philosophy is the mirror of the world spirit.
Hmm. Subjective spirit, objective spirit, and absolute spirit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
This is so mysterious that I need to have time to think it over. But I like the last bit you said.
What? The philosophy is the mirror of the world spirit?
Yeah, that was beautiful. Do you think it has anything to do with the brass mirror?
Since you ask, yes.
What do you mean?
I assume the brass mirror has some special significance. Oh, this is yours.
Uh-uh. That is yours, Ankunta.
No, no, it's yours.
I assume the brass mirror has some special significance since it is constantly cropping up.
You must have an idea what the significance is. I haven't. I merely said that it wouldn't be coming up unless it had a special significance for Hilda and her father. What that significance is only Hilda knows.
Was that romantic irony?
A hopeless question, Sophie,
Why?
because it's not us working with these things. We are only hapless victims of that irony. If an overgrown child draws something on a piece of paper, you can't ask the paper what the drawing is supposed to represent,
You give me the shudders.
right? Yes. So that is as far as Hegel is concerned. Let's see how many pages Kierkegaard is. Should we do Kierkegaard as well, or should we close today?
ఎన్ని పేజెస్ ఉన్నాయి చాలా లాంగ్ ఉన్నట్టుంది.
Yeah, another 10 pages. So I think we'll close.
Mm.
Today we look at all these ideas, right? You see these ideas across the board, you know. So they talked about this world spirit, right? We have that also in our Indian philosophy. It's called Samishti, basically, right?
Mhm.
Vyasti is the individual spirit, and Samishti is the whatever the global spirit or the ultimate reality, basically. And in the middle, he has introduced this societal aspect, right? Which again, coming from the Advaita aspect, it sidesteps basically, right? So in the Advaita concept, there are only two. One is the individual, and the other is the eternal, ultimate, basically. You know, but given that this society is something that Indians have always been privileged to have, right? Because there was a lot more weightage in this world spirit than the collective, as in the group thinking, right? Because Europe was influenced mostly by these Abrahamic faiths, which are very parochial or tribal in their approach, the community becomes very important, basically. But for the Indians, the community was always a de facto almost, right? So it came, but then the Bhakti movement, of course, emphasized that a lot more with the temples and the community rituals and things like that, right? So I mean, India has everything, so you cannot really say that uh, this was there or that was not there, basically.
Hmm.
You know? But nevertheless, the philosophies that we argue, or at least I personally am very fascinated by, are the individual and the eternal, ultimate. The society part of it today, we are governed more by the objective side of things, right? Which is where the modern constitutions and the the philosophical landscape that the humanists have shamelessly claimed, even though they have no ground to stand, they have nothing to show for in terms of proposals or discussions or whatever it is, right? So that's what is governing the society these days. And I mean, to a large extent, science has helped in making material progress a reality, basically.
Hmm.
That's it. Those are my 2 cents on this, basically. Very well put, actually. You should give kudos to Jostein for writing it this way.
And see, there are so many asking for examples in this chapter.
Yeah, because this is the synthesis part, right?
Mm.
So because of that, you have to, when you are trying to mediate between two parties, or the thesis and the antithesis, you'll have to explain your stance as to why you are picking up that aspect from that thesis and this aspect from the antithesis,
Correct.
basically.
Mm.
Yeah, which
Interesting
also
chapter.
explains. So another good example that you see in practice even during our other sessions is when we talk about Advaita, we also talk about Buddhism. You see,
Mm.
so that is the thesis and antithesis.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ah.
So the first thing you are confronted by when you go deep in Advaita is Buddhist proposals, basically.
Mm.
Yeah, right. Although in this case, the arguments involve a lot of Buddhist proposals sort of being contradicted, but ultimately what stood the test of time was Advaita. So
Hmm.
to say that all antithesis leads to synthesis is also not correct. Sometimes the thesis stands.
Mm.
So there it is. Hegel.
Yeah.
I think we have done. Any questions? Today we didn't have the Taoji did not show up. I'm sure people are busy. Otherwise this is a busy time of the year, right? We're almost at the end of
There
November.
is no busy in India. India is always busy.
True. But November is
Even
over
if
and we only have one more month left, sir. I can't believe it actually.
it's not real busy.
Yeah. Okay. So no more
Yeah.
questions. If you don't have anything, Esther, we can wrap.
Yeah. Let's close, sir. I'm good.
Okay. Perfect. So whoever is going to view this session, if you have any questions, comments, anything to add to the discussion or anything else, please put it in the comments, post live, and please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.